Imagine doing everything right and still ending up with a death sentence. That is where this story begins. This is Daniel, and yes, it gets unfair very quickly. At the time, the Persian Empire runs like a flawless bureaucratic machine. Everything has a structure. Titles matter. Chains of command matter. Rules are written, copied, archived, and enforced with impressive enthusiasm. The system works, maybe too well. Think of it like a massive organization where procedures matter more than people, where policies outlive common sense, and where knowing how the system works is often more important than doing what is right. Daniel does not grow up in this system. He is a foreigner, an outsider, someone who technically should not be anywhere near power, but somehow he ends up there anyway. Not because he campaigns for it, not because he manipulates anyone, but because he is good at what he does. Daniel works well. That is the whole problem. He shows up, he does his job, he stays consistent. He does not cut corners, does not take bribes, and does not create unnecessary chaos. In a place filled with political maneuvering, Daniel's greatest crime is competence, and people notice, very quickly. The other officials start watching him, closely. They wait for mistakes, they expect scandals, they assume there must be something hidden. After all, no one is that clean in a system like this. So, they investigate. They check his work, they check his decisions, they check his habits. Nothing. No corruption, no negligence, no embarrassing secrets, which is deeply inconvenient. Because when someone thrives without playing the usual games, it exposes everyone else who does. And that makes people nervous, especially people who are very invested in keeping their status exactly where it is. Daniel becomes respected, trusted, promoted, and with every step up, the tension increases. Not because he is aggressive, not because he challenges authority, but because he does not need to. He stands out simply by being reliable, the kind of person who accidentally raises the bar just by existing, the kind of co-worker who turns average effort into a visible problem. So the officials do what systems always do when they cannot find a flaw. They stop looking for one, because if you cannot accuse someone of doing something wrong, you change the rules. And once that idea appears, everything else falls into place. Daniel, meanwhile, continues his routine. Unaware that competence has quietly turned him into a target, unaware that the system he serves so well is already being adjusted, specifically for him. The machine is still running smoothly. It is just no longer neutral. The plan was never to destroy Daniel directly. That would have been messy, risky, obvious. Instead, they decided to let the system do the work, and more importantly, they decided to use Daniel's faith against him. The officials gather and come up with a new idea, one that sounds impressive, official, and completely reasonable if no one thinks about it for more than 5 seconds. They draft a temporary law, just 30 days, very short term, very harmless, at least on paper. For 30 days, no one is allowed to pray to anyone at all, except the king. No gods, no personal rituals, no quiet exceptions, just the king. Anyone who breaks the rule is sentenced to death. Specifically, they get thrown into a lion's den, which feels like a bit of an overreaction, but that is bureaucracy for you. The genius of the plan is that it looks fair. The rule applies to everyone. Technically, it is written broadly, enforced strictly, and wrapped in enough official language to feel legitimate. But in reality, it is aimed at exactly one person. It is the legal equivalent of creating a policy that says, this applies to everyone, while staring directly at one specific employee. All that is left is approval. The officials bring the proposal to the king. They frame it as loyalty, as unity, as a way to reinforce authority and national stability. The king listens, nods, and signs it. No deep analysis, no second thoughts. The decision-making process resembles clicking "I agree" on a very long set of terms and conditions. And just like that, the law is official. Daniel finds out immediately. He knows what the law says, he knows how long it lasts, and he knows the punishment. There is no confusion here. And yet, Daniel does nothing differently. No protests, no public statements, no dramatic scenes. He does not argue that the law is unfair. He does not gather supporters. He does not attempt to make a point. He simply continues his routine. At the usual time, in the usual place, Daniel prays the way he always has. Quietly, consistently, without announcement or performance, not to provoke, not to rebel, just to remain the same person he was before the law existed, which, under the circumstances, is an extremely bold move. Because silent disobedience does not draw attention until someone is actively watching for it, and Daniel is being watched very closely. This is the kind of choice that looks insignificant from the outside and catastrophic from the inside. No noise, no resistance. Just a steady refusal to adjust himself to fit a system designed to trap him. It is not dramatic. It is not heroic in the traditional sense. It is routine, and that makes it dangerous, because in a system that relies on control, consistency becomes a liability, and obedience, when applied selectively, turns into a weapon. Quietly, efficiently, the trap closes. Disobeying in silence has never felt so risky. And that is how Daniel walks calmly toward the worst place imaginable, without raising his voice even once. The punishment is immediate, no appeal, no review, no loopholes quietly added at the bottom of the page. The law has been signed, the violation has been observed, and the system, once activated, does not hesitate. Daniel is arrested and brought before the king. This is the moment when the king realizes what just happened, very suddenly, very clearly, very too late. He recognizes the trap, not because someone explains it to him, but because the pieces finally line up. The law, the timing, the enthusiasm of the officials who are now extremely interested in seeing it enforced. The king tries to fix it. He looks for a workaround, an exception, a clever reinterpretation, anything. There is nothing. Because the law he approved was designed to leave no room for mercy, and the same efficiency that made the system impressive now makes it unforgiving. Good intentions. Terrible system awareness. Daniel, meanwhile, says very little. He is escorted toward the lion's den, a place specifically designed to remove all doubt about outcomes. The lions are hungry. The space is enclosed. The process is final. This is not a trial. It is not a test. It is a conclusion. The expected result is simple: no survivors. Think of it like walking into a room where everyone already knows how the story ends, except you are still expected to play your part anyway. The crowd gathers. The officials watch closely. The king watches helplessly. Daniel is lowered into the den. No dramatic resistance, no last-minute argument, no sudden escape attempt. He does not fight the guards. He does not negotiate terms. He does not sprint for an imaginary exit. There is no epic display of courage here. No slow-motion defiance, no speech meant to inspire future generations. Daniel simply accepts the moment as it arrives. The stone is rolled into place, heavy, final, unmovable. And then silence. No commentary, no reaction shots, no updates, just a sealed opening and a system that considers the matter resolved. The king orders the entrance secured and walks away, fully aware that this outcome is on him. The officials leave satisfied, confident that the problem has been permanently removed. The rules have worked exactly as intended, and that is what makes the moment so unsettling, because nothing feels chaotic, nothing feels dramatic. Everything feels orderly. The machine ran. The protocol was followed. The outcome was delivered. Daniel disappears into the dark, not as a rebel or a martyr, but as a man quietly processed by a system that does not care how right you were, only whether you complied. And now, with the stone in place and the night approaching, the story pauses in complete stillness. Because at this point, the question is no longer whether Daniel will survive. The question is why anyone ever thought he wouldn't. The king does not sleep. The palace is quiet, but his mind is not. He skips the evening rituals. No music, no distractions, no late-night comforts. Every attempt at rest fails almost immediately. Because somewhere beneath the palace floor, a decision he signed earlier that day is sitting very heavily on him. Daniel, meanwhile, experiences the opposite. Silence, no conversations, no negotiations, no updates from the outside world, just darkness, and stillness. Whatever happens next will happen without commentary. Two men, two very different nights. The king spends the hours replaying everything. The moment he approved the law, the smiles of the officials, the way it all seemed reasonable at the time. He goes over it again and again, hoping that repetition might somehow turn into a solution. It does not. It is the familiar experience of realizing far too late that a bad decision cannot be undone. Like making a disastrous call at work and spending the entire night mentally reopening the meeting, rewriting the conversation, and imagining a version where you simply paused for 5 more seconds. Morning finally arrives. The king does not wait. He gets up immediately and heads straight to the lion's den. No ceremony, no entourage, just urgency. The kind that comes from knowing you're about to confirm the worst outcome imaginable. He reaches the sealed entrance. And for the first time since the law was signed, he speaks with uncertainty. He calls Daniel's name, not loudly, not confidently, carefully. He expects silence, or worse. Instead, a voice answers. Daniel is alive. No panic, no injuries, no visible damage, just Daniel. Still himself. The moment hangs there, slightly awkward, as if reality needs a second to catch up. The impossible outcome has arrived without drama, without build-up, without warning. The king orders the stone moved. Daniel steps out, completely unharmed. Plan of the lions cancelled. The explanation, however, is surprisingly simple. Daniel did not overpower anything. He did not outsmart anyone. He did not engineer an escape. There was no clever trick, no physical strength, no last-second strategy that changed the odds. The system failed to account for one variable, and it was not Daniel's bravery. It was his consistency. While the king spent the night trapped in regret, Daniel remained exactly who he had been before the law, before the trap, before the sentence. He did not adjust his identity to survive the system, and somehow that refusal mattered more than any calculated move ever could. The officials who expected closure get confusion instead. The system, which prides itself on predictable outcomes, delivers something it cannot explain, and that makes everyone uncomfortable. Because when something survives a process designed to destroy it, the problem is no longer the individual, it is the process. The king sees it clearly now. The law did not fail because it was poorly written. It failed because it targeted the wrong thing, and the cost of that mistake has followed him through the entire night. Daniel stands free, the king stands corrected, and the system stands exposed. But the story is not finished yet. Because Daniel did not survive for the reason everyone assumes, and that reason is about to become very clear. Daniel did not survive because he tried to control the outcome. That part is important. Looking back, the sequence is almost boringly logical. Daniel is competent. That competence creates envy. Envy looks for leverage. The system gets manipulated. A rule is written. A sentence is enforced. Survival is statistically impossible. And yet, here he is. What Daniel never does at any point is attempt to manage the end result. He does not calculate odds. He does not adjust behavior to reduce risk. He does not switch identities depending on pressure. He simply stays consistent, which sounds simple until it costs you everything. In modern terms, this is the part most people get wrong. We like stories where the hero wins by outsmarting the system, bending the rules, or pulling off a clever last-minute move. Daniel does none of that. He does not play it smart. He does not optimize for safety. He optimizes for coherence. Competence brought him visibility. Integrity brought him enemies. The system responded exactly as systems do when they feel threatened. And Daniel paid the price. Integrity, it turns out, is expensive. It does not guarantee protection. It does not come with safety features. Sometimes it puts you directly in harm's way. But it also builds something systems cannot easily erase. Because coherence creates trust, not performative trust, not reputation management, real trust, the kind that remains intact even when outcomes turn hostile. Daniel was not saved because he performed courage. There was no dramatic defiance, no heroic pose, no attempt to be remembered. He was saved because he refused to become someone else under pressure. When the rules changed, he did not. When the risk escalated, he did not. When the consequences became real, he still did not. That consistency mattered more than strength, strategy, or timing. The lions were dangerous, yes, but they were obvious, predictable, honest about what they were. The real danger was quieter. It was the pressure to adjust, to compromise just enough to survive, to justify small changes for the sake of comfort, to let the system redefine who you are in exchange for safety. Daniel never accepted that trade. And that is why the story lasts. Not because of the miracle alone, but because of the clarity behind it. The system failed not because it was weak, but because it could not break someone who was not negotiating his identity. The lions were never the main threat. The demand to become someone else was. So the question this story leaves behind is not about ancient laws or royal decrees. It is about how much of yourself you are willing to trade when the pressure rises, and whether survival is worth it if coherence is the cost. And now one final question remains. Which story should we simplify next, Ruth, Elijah, or Nehemiah?